Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like, first of all, to take a moment to say that ridiculousness is not a contagious disease, because the Conservatives would be spreading it like a plague. So I would like to say also that I am sharing my time. Why is this ridiculous? Because this is a bill that is targeting our democratic system, our electoral system, and I think that deserves a great deal of attention, particularly with the scandals that we've had recently. So what is the government doing with such an important bill? Well, they put out a time allocation motion to prevent us from being able to discuss it. So right off the bat, we can say that that is completely ridiculous. And now, I'd also like to take the time to just remind my colleagues of a few statistics on voting. And of course, I'm not going to mention every single election, but on the 34th election, there was a voter turnout of 75.3%. A few years later, in 2000, 64.1%. In the last election, in 2011, the voter turnout was 61.1%. Therefore, very quickly, it's not hard to understand that the problem is, in terms of voters, it's not that people who have not got the right to vote are voting. It's that the people who have the right to vote are not necessarily turning out to do so. In the last elections, people received calls in certain ridings where the race was tight for the Conservative Party, and they were told that there were changes for the polling station, and in the end, it wasn't true. So we have people who had every right to vote who were not able to do so. So what we did, the problem that occurred during the last election was that people were prevented from voting. The problem was not people trying to vote who weren't supposed to. It wasn't that at all. It seems to me that that's pretty simple. It's easy to understand. But unfortunately, the Conservative Party, in its bill, doesn't seem to have understood that. There have been important decisions made by Elections Canada, or on the subject of Elections Canada. In the Hughes decision, there were a series of measures that were set out to improve the system, including the use of a voter identification card as a proof of identity and address by certain groups of voters who have trouble providing appropriate identification. What we see with C-23 is that the government is going against the very improvements that you can read about in the report of the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada's report on the 41st elections of May 2nd, 2011. For example, young people, Aboriginal groups, and seniors often don't have a lot of ID cards. And now they've been told that they can no longer vote with the voter identification card, with someone beside them to vouch for them. And it's completely ridiculous. In my riding, there are small communities of some 300 people, let's say, where everyone knows everyone else. So Mr. X arrives to vote, and because he doesn't have an acceptable ID and no one can vouch for him, he won't be able to vote. Whereas everyone in the polling station knows him because they live in the same business. They've all known each other for 40 or 45 years. They know very well who he is, and you can see to what degree this is ridiculous. Now, another problem that's a major problem with this bill is that people are now being prevented, or rather the Chief Electoral Officer will be able to prevent people from voting. So now he can't talk to them, rather, about voting. So he can only tell them where to vote and how to vote. Now, it's ridiculous, but when I go around my riding, the problem that I run into when I ask them why they didn't vote, it is indeed, they respond to me, they say, why should I vote? So the why is the important point here. These are not technical pieces of information. If you are convinced that it's worth voting, the technical information, first of all, will be sent to you, and you'll go and vote. But what we need to do with people who aren't voting is to convince them of the importance of voting. We have to convince them of the importance of it, and we have to also convince them that it's not terribly difficult. Sometimes with students, for example, would have a different address, they're in residence, and their ID cards don't say that, and they have problems getting themselves onto voters lists for the first time. So to get them to understand, and we have to convince them of the importance of the why. And now the chief electoral officer is going to lose that power. So this was perhaps another opportunity to increase the voter turnout. There are provinces rather, who are working on different means to get the vote out. It's not easy, but we can't stop the fight to increase the voter turnout. This is very important to our democracy. Now, here's a person who had the right to do this, and it's being taken away. It's completely ridiculous. Another aspect of this bill that, in my opinion, makes no sense at all when you have some perspective is that they're saying that they want to prevent major donors from controlling elections. Well, they're moving the individual cap from $1,200 to $1,500, and so I think that we realize that the Conservative Party thinks that this will be in their favor. So, really, overall, Mr. Speaker, we have a bill that has been written by Conservatives for Conservatives to find a way to twist things the most to their advantage. Whereas we have a serious problem of election fraud, problems within our election process, and all they're doing is giving a partisan response to this. And it makes no sense whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, recently in Quebec, we studied the problem, for example, of donations to political parties. And what was decided after a process of studying the issue and consultation is that we decrease the amount significantly. So now the use of false names has become ineffective because it takes too many people to be able to cobble together a significant amount. If you can give $1,500, you could find 10 people who want to lend their names. That's $15,000. If you find 20 people, you're up to $30,000. But if perchance the maximum was $200 or $300, well, then it becomes quite a lot more complicated, and it becomes a lot more difficult to fill the party coffers. So this logic and this discussion wasn't part of the study of this bill. In fact, the minister said that he met with the chief electoral officer, and that's not even true. We don't know how they arrived at this bill, and all that seems clear is that they wanted to be able to improve their chances for the next elections. Yes, therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am extremely disappointed, particularly as the NDP had tabled a motion saying that we do something within the next 6 months, and in 6 months' time, this is all they managed to produce. It doesn't make any sense that they took all of this time to arrive here with a bill that will be greatly to the advantage of the Conservative Party. It's a bill that doesn't even respect the fundamental principle of improving our electoral system, which is extremely unfortunate. I think we could have done much better when we think that Canada is regularly a regular participant as an election observer in foreign countries, and that we, when the time comes to improve our own election processes, we seem to find ourselves with bills like this that are full of shell games and smoke and mirrors, and I think it's really completely unacceptable. It's an unacceptable attitude, And it's ridiculous that it comes from the Minister of Democratic Reform. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, one of the issues that we have always found with this particular government, since it's achieved its majority, is that it seems to want to do things its way, or there is no way. In other words, in terms of amendments. You know, here we have the Elections Act that's coming before the House, and there's a great deal of concern in regards to the need to be able to bring forward amendments to make it better legislation, to improve upon the legislation. Our critic responsible for the Act has already posed the question in terms of the Minister Direct, in terms of being able to accept amendments. It is a concern that we have, Mr. Speaker, within the Liberal Party, that it is important that the government recognize that there will be amendments brought forward, and we're appealing to the government to seriously look at accepting amendments. This is not something that it has done in the past, and I'm wondering if the member might want to add her comments, maybe concerns in regards to the need to improve the legislation through amendments, and the concerns that she might have in regards to amendments that they might be bringing forward.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I would like to specify that I made a mistake. I'm sharing my time with the member for Vancouver East. And to answer my colleague's question, what I would like to say is that here we are faced with a bill that was tabled by the Minister for Democratic Reform. So I think that it would be the tiniest thing that he be prepared to accept the democratic process in committee and be willing to consider amendments. But what I've seen since I became a member of Parliament in this chamber is that the Conservatives are unable to accept a single amendment, even if it's reasonable and well-founded, based on solid arguments. They're unable to do so. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, they're unable to even accept amendments that are intended to correct errors in their French, in their bills. And, of course, they do this through members who only speak English and who reject the amendment, saying that they don't agree with an error in the French language. So when you can't even accept polishing the language and improving a bill when there are errors in the language, I have serious concerns about what's going to happen in committee, and I think it's hypocrisy that they can't accept anything. Questions and comments?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We keep coming back to a certain area of the discussion with respect to identification. We've gone over a number of times that there are a number of pieces of identification that are eligible to be used to prove a person's identity. The bill also does allow for interpretations and does allow the elections chief electoral officer to add pieces of ID. But I keep coming back to page 25, and she talks about French, so I'll do my best to read it in French, and I apologize.
It's the address that appears on pieces of identification in paragraph 2, and it is in accordance with the information that appears on the election, or the voters list rather, that has been established.
The opportunity for the person in the election, the polling clerk, to make a determination that even if they don't have the full identification that is required to prove their residence, they are still eligible to vote. How does that not improve the voting system and allow people the opportunity to vote, while at the same time guaranteeing Canadians that the vote being cast is being cast by the right person?
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, during the last election, people were delighted to be able to vote with the voter identification card. It simplified their lives a great deal because there was no surprise. I'm a nurse and I'm working with elderly people, and it's surprising there are some people who really have no ID at all. They have things that have cards that have expired, didn't think to have them renewed, they can't find their ID, and now they're told that they can't vote, even if someone could vouch for them. So it makes no sense to want to reduce the access that voters have to vote. And that's not the problem. There are currently no people trying to vote who don't have the right to vote. The problem is the people that have been sent to the wrong places by the Conservatives instead of to the right voting station. That is the problem.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you.